everybody. It's Dee from Fire Within Coaching. Welcome to What Lights Your Fire. Today we have Richard Donovan here. Richard is a mindset coach. Hey, Richard, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Dee.
Well, thanks for being here. So we are on the opposite sides right now of the ocean, right? So you're in England and I'm in the United States.
Yeah, I'm in Norwich, actually, Norwich, UK.
Okay, all right. Very nice, very nice. So tell me a little bit about what you do and sort of how you got there.
Yeah, so you mentioned obviously that I'm a mindset coach
Mhm.
and I have a particular niche in mindset coaching.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a mindset coach for software developers and software engineers. And I mean, how did I get there? From a long career in software development spanning, it's like 22 years now. Um, and, during that time, I've worked at the very bottom of companies.
Right.
I've been your junior, your mid-level, your tech lead. I've been a software architect, and I've even ran my own business doing software contracting. So
Wow, yeah.
I've done quite a lot,
A little bit, just a little.
just a bit.
Well, that's great. So that's a lot of experience. Like I feel like when you're, when you can say, "Hey, I've sort of worked at all levels," like it's sort of like, "Well, where do you go now?" So in computer software, and I'm totally judging right now, just to be so computer software and mindset coaching, like for me, one's here and one's here. Like, how do you bridge the two?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, and I think you're probably not alone in thinking that. And if I think back to myself during my career, particularly in my earlier years, although I always had quite a good mindset, I didn't fully understand it. I didn't realize the strength that was in it, and I didn't utilize it as good as I could have.
Right.
But I would have been in the same place as you. If someone came in and said to me, "Oh, mindset, you can think like this and you can improve your productivity and feel better and manage stress and anxiety and all of this stuff," I'd be like, "Really? Who
Yeah.
who are you to tell me you
Right.
you haven't been through what I've been through?
Right.
You don't sit here and deal with what I deal with." That would have been my opinion, in all
Right.
honesty.
And
But
I think I think it's fair because when you're saying that, I'm like, wow, I probably would have sort of, if I wasn't in the right mind frame, I would have thought the same thing. I'm like, who the hell is this person trying to come in here and telling me how to, to use my mind pretty much.
yeah, absolutely. And it took me a long time. Obviously, I had particular mentors along the way later into my career. And I think it's probably fair to say that the whole mindset thing, the seed was planted quite a long time ago, and
Right.
it slowly grew. So when I started to, get interested in self-development and
Yeah.
read more books, and little things kind of caught my curiosity, and
Yeah.
somewhere along the line it all tied together when I I met a friend, and he was working as a mindset coach, and nothing to do with software development,
Right.
but he was working as a mindset coach, and we had a conversation, and it just all came together. And I was sitting I was sitting at my desk as a software architect,
Mm-hmm.
or probably the height of my career for a global FTSE 100 company.
Wow.
Probably couldn't have been more comfortable. Um, it was quite enjoyable,
Yeah.
but I think maybe the economy was going through a funny time,
Yeah.
and I was sitting there reflecting, and I just thought to myself, do you know what? If, and this is a little bit morbid, if I was if I was on my deathbed
Mhm.
and I was to reflect on the time that I had here, and I don't know this, but if that time is the only time that we ever have,
Right.
I just thought, do you know what? I've spent 80% of it, 90% of it, sitting in front of a computer, not really talking to people, not
Right.
really interacting, not impacting people
Yeah.
the way that I know that I can.
Right. Exactly.
And I would think, do you know what? I'm not happy with that. And in that moment, I just made a decision. Do you
Yeah.
know, I want to work more with people,
Right.
and I want to impact people
Right.
rather than close myself off,
Yeah.
which was a complete identity shift for me, because I was like your classic introvert
Yeah.
and your classic stereotypical software developer, largely, let's say 90%. I used to exercise, and a lot of them didn't, so
Oh, yeah.
I stood out from that perspective. But
So you were more fit. You had the same sort of thing, but like you were fit.
something like that, yeah, something like that.
Wow. Like, and I love that. Just because I feel like we all, anyone who's in this business of, mindset shifts and coaching, like we all, I think, can feel that and feel that there's a moment where it's like, what am I doing? Like I could be doing so much more. Like, yes, I make good money, I have, a home, I have this, I have that, but am I truly fulfilled? Am I truly doing what whoever put me on this earth intended me to do? So I think that's beautiful. And I think that many people don't ever have that moment. So the fact that you did it and now you're following, your dreams, I think it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and part of the work, obviously, there's so much to it, but that does also come into it as well
Yeah.
for other people, and allowing other people to maybe have that moment. And maybe that moment is a small shift from where they are. It might just mean working on software that has a particular purpose for them. It doesn't have to be a complete change of identity or change of career. It could just be like, oh, wow,
Right.
I'd feel so much better getting up every morning to work on this system if I knew it was contributing to whatever it is that they're so passionate about.
Oh, like I can so relate to that because when you were talking, so I before I started my company, I was actually, which I'm not a tech person at all, but I was very fortunate to be in training. So I was doing technical training and I was like, wow, like I could do this, but like I feel like I am just spitting out numbers and I'm just, I'm not really helping people. I'm just saying, hey, this is the workflow and this is how you do it. And for me, it was just like, wow, like this is not like I'm closed off. I'm not using the part of my brain that's going to help me be the best me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so now you said you had some mentors along the way that sort of helped you to get to where you're at now. So how did you meet them? Like, were you on a specific platform? Or are they just people throughout, like, your life that you met? I know a lot of people that I've spoke to, they're having a hard time finding mentors that match them completely.
Yeah. So for me, several people throughout my career have just, they've taken an interest, and I think there's so much when you're looking for a mentor. There's so much about how enthusiastic you are about the subject that you're working in,
Yeah.
and I was always enthusiastic. At least I asked questions,
Mhm.
probably annoyingly so, and
That's how you
and
learn, though.
indeed, indeed. And the first job that I was in, I had two colleagues that were really, really good for me. And when I first started my job, I was a non-technical tester. So they just said point and click,
Yeah.
and when it breaks, write it down and give it to
Yeah.
the smart guys, the developers. And and someone actually said to me, you are at the bottom of this company. Like, there's no one beneath you, right?
Yeah.
But they also said you can go anywhere within this company.
Well, yeah.
If you work at it, if you take an interest, if you do the work and you put the effort in, you can go anywhere.
Yeah.
And that was great for me. And when I found my first bug, I handed it over to the developers. They fixed it, turned it around really quickly, checked it. It was all fine. And I was left with that question: how did you do that? And then these basically two colleagues, they pointed at several books on the shelf and they said, take those home, read them, and that's where you start. And I was in a new town. I'd left home for this job. I didn't know anyone apart from my brother. He lived there. Didn't know anyone else, so I had no friends. So I took the books home. I read them.
That was your friends. Those were your friends right there. Your books.
Yeah, and then 6 months later, I got my first developer job. But those two colleagues were really instrumental in like directing me and encouraging me as well. They were really encouraging. You could see that they were getting quite a lot from seeing my development as well. And I think that's really good for them, but it's also good for me to see that they're getting something from it as well. And so they were really early mentors. Another kind of unofficial mentor that I had, he's actually an ex-professional footballer. And I ended up living with him. We trained and ran a marathon, and the London Marathon. So we trained together for that. And I'd had a situation and I needed somewhere to stay. And he's like, oh, I've got a house. I spend loads of time in London.
Yeah.
You practically got the run of the place. I was like, oh, okay. So I stayed there, and I remember one conversation with him, and he was inadvertently coaching me. We hadn't had a conversation about this. And
it just happens with
And he asked me, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with your time? This, that, and the other. And at the time, like, one of the things was just, I wanted to spend more time doing the things I like hobbies. And I was into running quite seriously. So I wanted to spend time doing that.
Yeah.
And so I said, I want to spend less time in the office, more time doing my stuff.
Right.
And he's like, all right, that's really interesting. And he said, what are you doing about that?
There it is.
And I just stood there in stunned silence. I was like, I'm not doing anything about it. He's like, how do you think that's going to happen then? I was like, yeah, all right, good question. And that just set the mind going, what am I doing about that? And it was probably 6 months later, it came up to review time at work, and I was on a contract, and they basically said, oh, there's no extra money here. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. How about I work one day less a week for the same money? and they were like, oh, we can do that. And I was like, fantastic. And it just really stemmed from that conversation. And I had the little voice in my head, what are you doing about it? And I was like, oh, this is a great situation. I can try it.
That's such a good question, though. Because even when you said that, I felt like I was like, oh, like, what if you're not doing anything about it? Because I remember having those conversations before, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to be. And it was like, well, what steps are you doing to get there? Talking about it, like. So it really does when you're asked that direct question, like, what are you doing about it? It really does get your gears turning as wow, shit, what am I doing about it?
Absolutely.
That's great. So now, where you are now and where you are, maybe where you want to be in 10 years? Do you have a plan? What are you doing about it? So where do you want to be in 10 years?
So in 10 years, so where I am at the minute, I kind of mix some software development, some contract work, and some coaching work. with some speaking work and some training work, and it's
all the things.
It's pretty fluid. And it's super helpful actually to drop into a contract and put myself back in that position again.
Yeah,
But I don't want to have to do that. So I'm looking to basically get a larger roster of one-to-one clients, but I want to do more training with software development teams for companies as well. So I'm setting up a developer support program, for example. And I have a training program that I can run for teams to try and impact their culture and make the mindset part of the culture.
Yeah.
On top of that, slightly loftier ambitions, in speaking at international conferences, traveling internationally to speak at company events.
Yeah.
Why not?
I mean, I would totally listen to you. Like, I think that
you just like my accent.
Do what?
You just like my accent.
Oh, I so do. I really do. I don't know what it is. I told you when we met that I like British TV and stuff, and like the accents just I'm like it just maybe I should have been like from England. I don't know. And the football. Don't forget about football.
Yes. In the football, indeed.
Yeah, the real football. That's what my husband calls it. It's the real football, not the American football. So, all right. So, well, are you going to play football in 10 years? Do you see yourself playing like football with your clients or anything?
No, I don't see that, to be honest. I've played football all of my life up to the age of 30, and it was almost like after that birthday, that was the end. It was
we're done with that.
Yeah.
So, now, are you ever looking for people to like do projects with, or because I know we have a growing viewing here, and we have people across industries, and I'm sure that we would have viewers that would love to work with you. Is that something that you're interested in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Collaboration side of it is so huge, and as you touched on before, this is kind of a new concept particularly in the software development world. And so, part of my challenge is to get that message out there to show that actually this can have a big impact on well-being, but also performance and productivity, and just getting companies to recognize that there is more that they can do. And this is something coming from someone who's been in the industry, been there, done that, and has lived it, basically.
So, and I love that because I think that experience really it goes a very long way. But like, how do you respond to a company or to like, we'll say a CEO? How do you work with a CEO that is just not in that mindset and is just still in that old way of thinking of production, productivity, and we need to meet these deadlines and yada yada, rather than like what can we do from a coaching perspective? What can you do from a coaching perspective? And kind of taking that, you can't fail type mentality off of it.
Yeah, I mean it's a really tough one, and I think the reality is that you probably don't, because they literally don't have that mindset. They won't see the value in it.
Right.
And if they don't, you're kind of onto a losing game. And unless someone within that company has an amount of influence and has the trust. And then it's about getting in and, as we kind of touched on before, is trying to shape that culture, trying to show the advantages of things like a no blame culture, for example. It's one of the biggest things in software development is there's a bug found in production, and everyone scrambles to, really, they're trying to confirm it wasn't them, right? They're trying to confirm it wasn't their fault. But in doing that, what they're actually doing is finding someone to blame. And if you're that person, and I have been that person,
So have I.
If you're that person, like you feel this big,
Yeah.
Especially if it's a crowded room, you've got all your peers, and someone comes in and it's like, Rich, it was that change you did on Friday. What were you thinking? It's all broke. And you just want to dig a hole and climb into it.
Well, and at that point, it's not psychologically safe, um,
Exactly that.
at
Exactly.
all. Yeah, and when that's not there, you cannot be productive. I'm a true believer of that, is you have to have that psychologically safe environment. You have to be able to, everyone has to have a voice, and then from there, there needs to be respect. And it's not very respectful to call someone out in a room in front of everybody, because then,
Yeah.
of course, like you said, I feel like I'm gonna, go hide, rather than just having those one-on-one conversations. And I really think that that's where we're shifting to, is taking that blame out of it, because when you do those situations, like you had said, like, that's a lot of blame, and not only are you feeling, oh god, I'm targeted, but your other people around the room are, oh, Rich really fucked up, you know what I mean? So it's really a bad situation, and it causes a lot of, like, just little traumas that people are just not even aware of at this point.
Yeah, the psychological safety is absolutely huge. And it comes down to even things like sharing your ideas. If someone belittles an idea that you shared, you're not going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And also just speaking up about mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happens when you try and hide them and it comes out later? Everything just gets worse. And so that, the psychological safety is just, it has a massive, massive impact. But I think what's interesting about it is a company can have a culture of psychological safety, but software developers themselves need to take responsibility for their own mindset. Because as I said in the first instance, the initial reaction isn't necessarily to blame someone.
Mm-hmm.
It's to not be the person
Yeah.
who's going to be blamed.
Yeah, it's for you not to be blamed, not for you to
Yeah.
blame other people, but
And if you can get enough people who are on board with that culture, and that whether it's your fault or not, it doesn't matter. We're going to fix it. We're going to learn and all of that stuff. Your default reaction isn't going to be to do that. It's just going to be, okay, we've got a problem.
right.
What went wrong? How do we learn from it? How do we fix it? How do we move forward?
Right. And it sounds like, when you're saying it, I'm like, that's so easy, but it's so not easy. Because again, when you have people that just, they're not there with the mindset, they're still kind of thinking the old way of businesses. Those are the people that I think are going to be having the most trouble with the shift, because, the train's leaving the station, and either you're going to be on it, or you're going to be left behind. That's truly what I feel. I feel like after the pandemic, we all just realized, hey, we're human. We're human. We make mistakes, and that's okay. So I really do think that, where you're headed, is the right, your train's going in the right direction for sure. I definitely, and I love it. And I think that you, just from the few times that I've talked to you, I definitely think that you're going to be making such a huge impact as you keep going. And I'm so glad that you want to be with, you want some collaborators. So, all of my viewers, if you are looking to collaborate with, someone with a beautiful accent, please do so. So is there anything, else that you want to share about your journey, or, just anything really? No subject is really off the table for me.
Well, I think something that's really important to me, something I'm really passionate about in this space, and we kind of touched on it already, but it's the software developer stereotype that software developers have of themselves and of each other. But almost more damaging is that outward stereotype
Yeah.
looking in, because it has such a big impact on how everyone interacts
Right.
and what you expect from people.
Right.
And again, from my experience, I started in that.
Yeah.
And I've found that particularly the last 5 years of my career, I completely changed, and
Right.
the value that I was adding to businesses that I worked for actually just went through the roof. And it
Yeah.
was because of me
Yeah.
being me, talking, collaborating, asking questions, sharing ideas.
Yeah.
And it was actually a lot less about the code I was writing.
Well, yeah.
And one of my biggest fears is that new people coming into the industry see this software developer stereotype. They see other people who fit that mold, and they think they have to be like that
Yep.
to be a great developer. And that's just something I just want to dispel.
Oh,
Anyone and everyone can be a great software developer, and
yeah.
so many of the skills that are probably not necessarily associated with that stereotype,
Right.
they actually add so much to the role.
Yeah.
Communication, collaboration, being sociable, being nice.
Yeah. Just
Amazing, right?
right. Yeah,
It
exactly.
goes a long way. It's such a big piece of the role.
Yeah. Well, software developers, I mean, they're just humans, right? I mean, they're just humans. They went to, I'm sure, they most of them go to school to or maybe even learn on their own. And they, go ahead and do it. It's not that they're, that they can't do the personal stuff or, the personal skills and stuff. It's just that they never needed to, like you said. So it's getting in there and saying, hey, you might not need it, but you're going to be 100% better for it. So it's trying to get that message across, which whew, I know you can do it though. I know you can.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's getting in there. It's, as I say, and it's so much about my own journey
Yeah.
from being really introverted.
Yeah.
So I'd sit in a meeting, and if someone asked me for my opinion, I'd sit there and I'd go bright red,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd always talk.
Yeah.
I'd answer the question. I'd feel so uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and then someone would say, "Oh, he's gone really red, hasn't he?" And I go, "Oh God, even more." And again, I'd just so uncomfortable. And what that would mean for me in those meetings is I'm not going to volunteer
Right.
my opinion. I'm not going
Right.
to ask questions.
Right.
Now, I learned to kind of explore that and put up with it more. So I learned to ask questions. I learned to speak more, but
Right.
I still felt really uncomfortable. And that was the big difference. That was the big shift for me later in my career. And again, looking back and looking around at the people that I've worked with, there's so many people like that don't want to share their opinions,
Yeah.
and they will keep quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think when you're confident enough to do that, you're confident in yourself,
That's big.
and you know that what you're speaking is just a representation of what you're about,
Mm-hmm.
what you're prepared to put up with, all the things like setting boundaries. You've
Yeah.
gone through those processes. You know what you want and what you don't want.
Right.
And when you're speaking from that place, you feel so much more comfortable. It doesn't matter what the subject is.
Yeah. Because you're being
And so,
authentic at that point. Yeah. You're being
exactly,
natural.
exactly that. And so for companies, if I think about all the software development companies or the companies that have software development teams, of all the software developers who are keeping fantastic ideas
Mm-hmm.
to themselves because they don't want to share them, or they believe it's a stupid idea, but they've had it, and actually it might spark another idea in someone else, and
There it is.
might need a few tweaks here and there, but it could be massive. And just from that perspective, I think there's so much potential being left on the table.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when, when you look at it from, the psychological safety piece of it, where you have a really good idea, or, maybe just a seed of a really good idea, and you can't speak it. So who knows what your idea could have done, like, for the world. So I look at it from that perspective of, if we, from corporate, if we start, silencing people, then we're not going to be as innovative, and we're not going to be as impactful as we could be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's a really, I mean, it follows on really well. So I'm obviously a mindset coach for software developers, but that also encompasses software development leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's a really interesting dynamic when a software developer goes into a leadership role.
Yeah.
They sometimes, not always, but they sometimes do that based on their technical ability.
Right.
And so they're really well respected because of their technical skills. And then they either just get moved into that role, or they hit some kind of ceiling from an individual contributor perspective.
Right.
And so they move into a leadership role, and they may not have had any training in that. And what they tend to do is basically reflect their own feelings and thoughts onto everyone else.
Yeah.
And they treat everyone how they would like to be treated, and they judge everyone by their standards.
Yeah.
And suddenly, if you're working under that person, you're feeling a hell of a lot more pressure. I can't live up to him. That guy is super smart. He's really intelligent.
Right.
Oh, what's he going to think about my solutions?
Yeah.
All of that stuff. And so, again, that there's a real mindset shift there for a developer going into a leadership role, to recognize, actually, yes, you have your own perspectives and opinions, and they're great and they're going to be useful to you, but you've also got a team who all have their own perspectives and opinions that might be quite different to yours.
And that's okay.
And yeah, exactly. And the battle is just knowing that that exists, and so many people don't. They just think this is how it is, and if it's not that, then it's wrong. And that's where the conflict comes.
Well, and that's where, those are all limited belief systems, right? So that's where the mindset shift comes in, where it's in the mind shift, it isn't even about anyone else. It's about you and how you view yourself, and how you want to show up in the world. And I think a lot of people will start to do the work, and then they'll realize, hey, this is really tough. And maybe I don't want to know these things about myself. Maybe I don't want to know that, I have this bias or certain things like that. But if you're going to reach your full potential, you have to get to know yourself. And then once you get to know yourself, then that's going to shine out. And then that's when you're going to start treating people better, because you're going to think that you deserve to be treated better. So I could see where all of this is kind of, it's kind of, I see like it's all kind of going around the drain, and it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, and it is interesting. Like, as you said, it's really about you in the first instance, and sometimes even leaders don't necessarily get that. They think, oh, I need to put my team on training, or I need to do this, and you probably do, but it does start with you. And there is an interesting side effect, and when you start to think about how your thoughts are impacting how you feel and how you behave, then you start to look at some of your team members, and you think, rather than thinking they're behaving ridiculous, or they're not doing this, or they're not doing, you start to think, I wonder what they're thinking to be feeling like that, or I wonder what they're feeling to behave like that. And that in itself just opens up a completely different view and a completely different conversation.
Yeah. And, tying it into another conversation I had about this, we were talking about driving, and how it's so easy that for you to get like road rage if someone cuts you off or something like that. And then you're thinking, oh, he's inconsiderate, or oh, he's this or she's that. But it's about what you're feeling. And instead, look into yourself and be like, well, wait, what if they were about to shit their pants and they needed to get to a toilet as fast as could be, and that's why they went ahead and That's why they went ahead and cut me off, or they're about to have a baby or something like that. And I think when you look at it from that perspective and really give others the humanity, I think that it really helps with that mind shift.
Yeah, and again, it's another interesting concept around the fact that we bring so much back to us, don't we? Like, oh, everyone's looking at me. I'm so important. That
Yeah.
driver definitely cut me up. He did it to me.
Me, yeah.
In
Take it
fact, he had
personal.
no idea you even existed.
Yeah,
And that just
exactly.
happened.
Exactly. Like I don't when I'm driving, for example, like I don't like I know I probably cut people off, and and I don't think about their feelings, so why should someone else think about my feelings when they're cutting me off? No, you're just because you're in your own brain and you're thinking about where you're going to get to.
Yeah.
But I don't have to hold on to, Richard who cut me off, 20 minutes ago. I don't need to hold on to that now. You know what I mean? And I think that that's sort of, you can use that with work too. Like, you don't have to hold on to what you think someone's motivations are. Actually ask them, have a conversation with them. And if they don't know, help them find out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, as you say, it's linking how you're thinking to any given outcome that you achieve. And yes, you can sit there in the car, you can berate the driver in front of you, you can get angry, you can feel all hot and sweaty, and then you can, I don't know, arrive at the office and snap at a colleague,
There it is.
Mm-hmm. And suddenly you've had a terrible day. Or if you rewind that back and that initial thought is, ooh, that person's just made a mistake. They're probably feeling a bit embarrassed.
Yeah.
I'll carry on with my drive.
Yeah.
And suddenly your entire day is completely different.
Change.
And it all just started with a single thought.
Yeah.
How
Well,
many times can that happen in a day?
yeah, because you have the opportunities to be upset, I think, probably all day long, right? Like we have things that come across that, yeah, it could piss us off, but like, are we going to stay in it and we're going to let it, kind of eat us alive? Or are we just going to be like, yeah, I got pissed off and I understand why I got pissed off, but that's okay. I'm not going to be pissed off anymore and move on. But it takes a lot of self work to get there.
And awareness. So I think so many people are just not aware that there is another way, or they're not aware of how much control that they can have.
Yeah.
And so without that awareness, like they're just doing what they've always done or what they think is the only way. They're not even choosing to do it because they don't think there is another way. And again, that's part of the whole mindset message and getting that information out there so that people can understand actually you do have a choice. You can make a conscious decision and you can change the direction, and ultimately you can impact your outcomes in any given situation and basically, in your career and in your life.
Right. But it's also not going to happen overnight. And I think that that's what I've found in my career is that, people work, and it's like, okay, where's my reward? And then you don't get the reward. It's like, oh, well, I'm done. Well, what about all that work that you just put into that point? Like all of it matters, but it's kind of like you just forget it all because it's an ego thing. All right. It's your ego. Your ego is it thinks that it's more important than it should be at this point. So.
And I think that's a huge differentiator between those people who are successful and those who aren't. I mean, so many people like to look at the overnight success and forget the years and years of graft that went into it beforehand. And suddenly, they've made this big success. They just managed it. They've got the formula. They just turned up.
Took them 25 years, but they got it.
Exactly. There's just none of that. There's so much work and it's never linear either. It's not like, oh well, if I just put in this amount, it's definitely going to be here. It just doesn't work like that, does it?
It doesn't. And you have to start very small. with the, for example, driving. Start with the driver. Start with not getting pissed off at drivers when they come. If you know that you're, a, hot-headed driver, well, know that going into it, have that awareness and do something about it when you start to get angry. And making those little changes in your life, I think end up being, in the bigger sense, at the end of the day, it's all going to go to the same place. It's all moving you forward.
Yeah. Well, an exercise I do with almost all of the developers that I coach, and it's the simplest thing. So simplicity is one of my core values. It was as a developer, it is as a coach.
I love it.
And this is so simple. And you basically make a list of all the things that you want.
Right.
And that's like how you want to feel, what you want to do, where you want to be, how you want to spend your time, all of those things. And they can be big and they can be tiny. And then you do the same with your don't wants.
Right.
I don't want stress. I don't want anxiety. Thoughts, feelings, how you want to, where you want to be, what you want to do, all of that. And again, it's just about building that awareness. And then once you've done that and you've actually written it down, you can look at it. How many people actually write down what they want and don't want and look at it? Not many.
No.
But when that starts to filter into your brain, when you end up in these situations, oh, I'm driving at the wheel, you know what? I don't want to feel so angry all the time.
Yeah.
And it's an extra trigger to let that pass, or, to think about it differently. It's like, I have a choice here. I've got this thing on my don't wants list, and I've probably got something opposite on my wants list, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I'm going to choose right now. Am I choosing to bring in what I don't want?
Right.
Or am I choosing to bring in what I want?
Yeah.
And you just, you kind of hold yourself accountable with that. Right. But it's just having that awareness, because people haven't created these lists. They haven't written them down. They don't have them right here in any given situation. So they don't have that extra ability to make that conscious decision.
Right. Right. And that's why we have mindset coaches to help you out.
Exactly.
I love it. Well, thank you for all the work that, you do with the software developers in general, because I told you my husband's in IT and he's in that world. So, I appreciate any mindsets that you can do for software developers. I definitely appreciate it. And is there anything else that you wanted to share or anything? You want to give your business a plug or anything like that?
Well, so yeah, my business is RD Coached, and basically rdcoach.com. You can find out all about that. And I've got a newsletter on there called The Modern Software Developer, which is really the modern software developer looks after their mindset, looks after their well-being, recognizes the value in relationships and collaboration. It's not necessarily about all the technical stuff. So
and what was it? It was called again,
The Modern Software Developer.
Software developer. And it's rdcoach.com?
That's right.
And it's just R as in Richard and then D as in Donovan? Okay.
Correct.
Just make sure you're not doing anything funky out there.
No. I told you, simple. Simple is one of my core values.
So I was like, you said it, and I was like, wow, that is simple, isn't it? It's easy to remember, right?
Exactly.
Well, it's been amazing chatting with you. And if you, think of anything afterwards, feel free to let me know, and I'll go ahead and add it to the post when I do post this to my social media.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. It's been good.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.